Hi, this is Rick Julian, author of The Way, and this is commentary on verse 10. Quiet your mind and listen to the silence. This notion of quieting the mind, of silencing the chatter, and being able to listen to the silence is one of the most powerful practices that one can ever have in one's life. We are all too often distracted by all of the chatter that goes on in our minds, most of it highly, highly unproductive, repetitive. It's like a skipping record in our brain. Old memories and old conversations and old voices. I have found that there are a number of practices that are freely available to all of us. They require only a quiet space for us to stretch out or sit. And there are a number of videos and recordings on YouTube and elsewhere on the internet. And they will do guided meditations that help you proceed through the process of quieting your mind. One of my favorites is Yoga Nidra, Nidra, which is a specific practice that involves a lot of body scanning, and you find yourself in a comfortable position, and then you are walked through a practice of scanning your body, beginning at your finger on your little finger on your right hand, then the next finger, and then the next finger, and then you move to the back of your hand, and then your palm and your wrist and your forearm and your upper arm and your shoulder and your chest, and so forth and so on, so that you are scanning your awareness of your entire body. And as you are doing this, it makes one mindful of the silence that is available to us. And it makes us present. It is deeply, deeply relaxing. And it is a wonderful experience that allows us to listen to the silence. That is one practice. Transcendental meditation is another. There are many, many ways of doing this. Another favorite of mine is just sitting in silent meditation and trying to clear one's mind altogether without hearing anyone guide us. It is a very challenging thing to do, and I think that until one has attempted it, if one has never done this before, you aren't aware of exactly how much noise is going on in your brain. And a lot of people find that to be very disconcerting, and it is a struggle to turn off all of the chatter. But it is worth working through that struggle. It is worth finding a practice, and there are many, many different types that allow you to address this issue of the overly active mind, so that you can find a place of silence within yourself and actually listen to yourself. Speaking for myself, and I don't believe this is unique to me, I feel like I almost have a cast of characters within my mind. There are immature voices that are concerning themselves with trifling kinds of things. There's a voice that has a really big ego and wants to talk about how great, I am about this or that. I have a very stern critic who often gets into big fights with this ego voice and tries to put the ego voice in its place. And also tells me that I'm not good enough to do something. I'm not smart enough to accomplish something. I have a whole cast of characters that that I encounter when I start to when I slow down enough to pay attention and kind of label them as they emerge. But beyond all of them, there is a very wise voice that I think is closest to my soul, my guardian voice, that is ultimately my guide. Maybe it is the voice of my soul. Again, this is a very abstract adventure to try to suss out exactly who is who and what they represent. That is a voice that I don't mind listening to. It's often a quiet voice. It requires me to get very quiet, or else be in a lot of trouble. When one is in very stressful situations and something very urgent needs to be done, an urgent decision needs to be made, that is the voice that I typically am paying the most attention to. But beyond that, there is a place where we can go where there is no voice. And the practice that I have for that involves lying down and beginning to breathe very deeply. Just the practice of breathing very deeply has its own calming effect. And I think that most of us breathe too shallowly most of the time, so that deep breathing oxygenates the blood and has its own calming effect on us. And then I begin to imagine a very still scene of an ocean that has a mirror glass surface. It's so still. And I imagine that glassy surface, the stillness of it, as being the stillness of my mind. And every once in a while, an idea will enter into there, and it becomes a wave. And I let it enter. I let it rise as a wave. I don't fight it. I don't resist it. I don't flee from it. I let it emerge. And I simply allow it to fall away. By not fighting it, by not giving it energy, that wave is capable of melting back into this glassiness, a surface that I like to have as the stillness that I'm aiming for. And once I have been there for a while, it's a bit like a balancing act on the edge of a razor. And it becomes, as we've talked about in these verses, about not trying to do something. I am just balanced on the edge, not teetering back and forth, not focusing too hard, just being there. In the absence of thought, in the absence of any chatter. And ultimately what it does is it relaxes the mind. It rejuvenates the mind. It creates space for new ideas to enter, but not during this exercise, but after it, once the mind is relaxed and at ease. Then those ideas don't have to elbow their way in and fight off the other chatter. There's a clean stage that has been set, and they're able to enter onto that stage and make their presence known. And you have those ideas then have your attention because they aren't competing for other things. So that's one of the ways that I have practiced this idea of silence. you will find your own. And be patient with yourself. This is nothing that happens. It depends on everyone. All of us have different natures. Some of us have much more active minds than others. Others are naturally gifted with more calm minds. For those people, it is an easier task. For people like me, whose minds tend to be more active, it's a bit more of a challenge. But I promise you, it is worth the reward is worth the effort of being able to develop a practice where you're able to lead yourself into this silence. Remain flexible like a blade of grass. When I was growing up, I had a couple of different trees that were around me in my yard. One was a willow tree in the backyard, and I saw that willow tree when it was first planted, and I watched it grow for about 12 years until I left home to go to college. So I spent 12 years with that willow in my life. And in the front yard, I had several pine trees, in fact, that had been there for a very long time. They were older, much older trees. And I learned some very important lessons about flexibility from those trees. The pine trees were always littering the ground. Their branches were always falling onto the ground. The pine tree had rigid branches, stiff branches. And the older that they got, those trees, even though they were planted when I got there, they continued to grow. And the older that they got, the stiffer they became. And whereas when I compared them to the willow tree, it was always flexible. We had a number of very heavy storms come through during my childhood, and I always was much more fearful of what might happen with the pine trees in the front yard, that they might crash down on our house, or that branches would fall and do damage to our cars. Because when the strong winds came in, you could hear those trees almost creaking as they tried to sway in these heavy gusts of wind. But that was not the case with the willow tree. The willow tree, on the other hand, was flexible like a blade of grass. It leaned and it swayed with the wind, and it would get contorted in all kinds of different ways. And yet its flexibility made it safe. Its flexibility was its strength. And I never ever worried about the willow tree harming our house or doing any damage to any of our possessions. So the encouragement is to remain flexible in your thinking, remain limber even within your body, continue to stretch throughout your life, continue to work on your balance, especially as you get older. That flexibility is a great gift. Don't allow yourself to ossify, to become stiff, because that stiffness does not work to your advantage when you need to be adaptable, especially as you get older. Remain adaptable and remain flexible, and you will remain viable for a very long time. Purify your inner vision until only light remains. I think that this purification of vision is a corollary to the silence that we discussed, that our vision can often be contaminated with extraneous ideas. One visualization that I have that I learned very early was watching lions. There used to be these nature shows that would come on Saturday afternoon. Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom was the one I most often watched. There would be a lion lying in wait on the grass for a herd of gazelles to come by. catching gazelle was pretty important because often that lion may not have eaten. Pretty critical after a number of days had gone by that they catch something and have something for themselves and their family. But the key to success in catching a gazelle was to purify the vision and only focus on one gazelle, just picking a single one and locking onto that one with a laser focus and pursuing that single target, that single vision of your aim with vigor and intensity. Because if that lioness were to look from this gazelle to try this one and then that one and then another one, she would quickly run out of energy. And the distraction of her mind jumping from target to target would make her highly inefficient. The same thing happens with us and our own vision. If we are trying to pursue too many different targets, too many different goals simultaneously, we do need to stop and put a pause and think through our priorities. Which vision is the most important one for me? Which goal is the most important one? And establish a hierarchy of priorities, and then focus on the most important one with a great amount of intensity. And that chasing out the darkness of these distractions allows us to get to a place where only light remains, where the only light is the spotlight on the single thing that we want to accomplish, and with a single purpose and a single focus within that spotlight of our vision. That's when we become our most effective in accomplishing what we want to do. Love and lead others without your will. Again, the repetition of these core concepts is very, very important. We learn by repetition. Repetition is the mother of memory. So I never tire of hearing these phrases repeated in different ways. They are repeated because they are critically important. And the way they are juxtaposed with different ideas gives them a different flavor in different contexts. This one is pretty consistent, though. Love and lead others without your will. Love and lead them by your example. Not with your hand clenching the steering wheel trying to drive a situation, but lightly and gently steering, sometimes only by your example. If I want to lead a relationship in a certain direction, I'm more effective when I do it with a loving heart and a generous spirit than I am by setting out to accomplish things and making a to-do list of what everyone has to do. There are times and places for that kind of behavior, but our most effective approaches are the ones where we don't try so hard. In fact, we try as little as possible and try to lead more with our energy than we do with our hands or with our words. Allow everything to happen. I have learned in my life that by allowing things to happen rather than trying to control situations, I enjoy the benefit of others' contributions in a way that is not possible when I'm trying to control everything and tell others what to do. So often in my business, I will build teams of people and I will have a specific objective in mind. And our goal as a team is to perform a set of tasks in a general sequence to arrive at a successful accomplishment of that goal. And I find that the more prescriptive I am, the more detailed my guidance. I want this person to do this, this person to do this person to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and to give all these very detailed kind of micromanagement kinds of approaches to accomplishing something. I have tried that in the past, and I have found it very unsuccessful, because all I'm doing is using people as tools rather than allowing them to use their own ingenuity, their own problem-solving abilities. Often their skills are superior to mine in areas where mine are weak, and by me instructing them to do things based on my relatively weak skill set, I am actually hampering them, I am handcuffing them with my prescription in ways that doesn't utilize their fullest talent. So I find, on average, that by being really clear on what we want to ultimately accomplish, and then hiring people who I really respect their talent and their ability to make good contributions to the accomplishment of our goal, and letting them do what they do, and being very aware of not trying to become over-involved and controlling. And I often have members of the team come to me with something that I've asked for, even though it isn't the way I would do it. There's often a more interesting way, because it's beyond my imagination of how to approach something. We are also idiosyncratic in the way that we do things, that I am constantly surprised at how many different ways there are to actually accomplish something, and how interesting talented people can be in solving problems in ways that I could never imagine. They will come up with solutions I would never imagine. They'll have features that I just would never have occurred to me. And I find myself so frequently surprised and delighted by the results of giving people lots of rope and lots of room to operate within, and doing the things that I need done, that I have gained more and more confidence over the years in giving people as much space as possible. Now, it doesn't always work out perfectly. Sometimes we need to put up some guardrails so that people don't go too far off course and end up costing us too much time and having to redirect a process or start all over again because we went too far afield. But I think by setting up some general parameters, being very clear on the goal we want to accomplish, building teams with people for whom I have great respect for their talent and their work ethic and their ability to problem solve, and then just letting them do it, and then making adjustments so that all those contributions fit together to solve the ultimate goal that we want. I find that to be a very, very enjoyable way of working on projects, and have found it very successful in doing things even on a global scale. I encourage you to consider that. Leave your thoughts and understand everything. This again leads us back to the value of silence and the power of silence. That when we get beyond words, when we get beyond concepts, what emerges is what psychologists call a gestalt. It is the wholeness of all things. It is a unified whole that we can appreciate. And when we are able to arrive at the gestalt, there is a holistic appreciation of how things fit together and are integrated with one another. And that is a very powerful tool of our perception. It's not always easy to get to that perspective, but one is really challenged to even approach it if we are too hung up on very rigid frameworks and conceptual constructs. It's best to leave as much room as possible and to be as flexible as possible when we are approaching something that we want to understand, and let it present itself as it is in its fullness, and Just park the constructs over on the side, park the frameworks. They're always going to be available, and we can always return to them as we need. But there's a lot of power in just keeping ourselves completely open-minded and letting the fullness of, as much fullness of reality to present itself to us. Begin things and help others grow. There's great power just in beginning. I was listening to a neuroscientist the other day who has done a lot of study on high performance, and he was talking about how, giving some advice on how to become unstuck. And one of the things that he observed is that people who are stuck are often waiting for the right motivation, to have the right, to be in the right mood to change their course, to get started on something. I will start when I really feel inspired. That's when I'll start. And I keep waiting and waiting for this inspiration. And he said, no, it's the reverse. There's a counterintuitive quality to this, that mood follows action, that the key to becoming unstuck is to act first. And once you have begun acting, then the mood will emerge and support you in that action, and then fuel the action even more and increase the enjoyment. If the goal is to have a good and pleasant mood that fuels the action, begin the action, and that mood will often accompany you after you have begun it. This is true with couples after you've been married for a long time. When you're young and early in your marriage, having sex is a no-brainer. It's a very easy thing to do. And because your passions, there's still a freshness to one another. And what happens as we get older is we become more routine in our approach. And then we become more reluctant, and we feel that I don't want to do this until I'm in the mood to do it, and I have to feel in the mood. And then where the mood becomes less frequent, and so that intimacy becomes less frequent, and the lack of physical intimacy contributes to a growth of space and distance and emotional intimacy. So one of the best ways to apply this practice to a relationship is to just begin to have physical intimacy even when you aren't in the mood. And it's amazing how quickly the mood comes along. Just begin this first steps of intimacy, and relax and breathe and observe that all of a sudden the energy starts, the kundalini begins to rise. And before you know it, you're really enjoying yourself doing something that 10 minutes ago, it was the furthest thing from your mind. But knowing that it is important to maintain that intimacy, you proceed ahead and initiate and are receptive to your partner's initiation, even if it's not at the top of your priority, knowing that it is an important component of a healthy relationship to step into it and allow yourself to begin the action, and you will find that the mood will follow. It's very consistent in that way. And that applies to almost everything else. So that's the power of beginning things and helping others grow. Certainly, we help our intimacy grow. When I begin a new project and I recruit others to join me, had I not begun a project, then I would have no need for anyone else. But after I have begun it, then I need the assistance of others. I'm creating opportunity for them. I'm creating opportunity for me. There's a follow-on effect, a cascading effect that I've created opportunity for them. As this becomes more successful, we create opportunity for others, and it helps them grow in their experience. It helps them grow in their accomplishment. All of these things begin to occur in a certain kind of domino effect once something is actually begun. Goethe says, whatever you can do or think you can do, begin it now. Boldness has power and magic in it. Those are powerful words to live by. So whatever eggs you've been sitting on, and some of us have been sitting on eggs for years and some decades, let them crack, let them hatch. Begin it now and help yourself and others grow. Have but do not hold. Give without expectation. Lead without control. This is the way. We have consistently talked about these ideas for several verses now, so I don't feel the need to unpack them much more. Have, but do not hold. Keep your palm opened and receptive. Let things land and depart as they will. Give without expectation, knowing that the energy always returns back in some form at the time and place of its choosing. Lead without control. Keep your hands very lightly on the wheel. Marvel at the creativity and the novelty that people express, and enjoy that and learn from it. When we allow others to do things in the way that they want to do them, it is very often a learning experience for us to see how many different ways things can be done. This is the way. That is the end of the 10th commentary on the way.